Hi, everyone, and
I
welcome
was
to
rocking
this
out.
week's episode of Hot Jobs. I'm sorry to interrupt your dance session there, Rue, but I did really like the way you were jamming out to our theme song.
The music just gets me going
It
every time.
really gets you pumped for today's episode. And I'm excited to have Rue with me and all of his energy with me today.
I'm the guy who brings the energy.
That's right. That's why he's here. But before we get to our energetic topic, which I think is going to be really interesting for folks, I know it's something that we've talked about before and it sparks a lot of conversation. But before we get there, we're going to thank our sponsor today, who is Customer.io. Customer.io is a customer engagement platform that lets companies send automated messages either through SMS or email to their customers based on their behavior. So, if you've added something to your cart, but you don't actually check out, and then suddenly a little promo email shows up in your inbox. That's how Customer IO operates. So if you own a small business or have a shop or something that if you sell merch, this might be something you want to look into. So check out our friends at Customer IO. They also have a number of opportunities for hire. Great company. We currently have a SkillBridge intern at Customer IO, and she has nothing but rave reviews. So go ahead and check out our friends at Customer IO. Moving on to today's topic, Rue. So something I know you've been excited to share with our community is talking about decoding your experience, your military experience, or civilianizing your experience. I want you to take a second why you feel so passionately about this topic.
Um, it's for good reasons, I guess. It's more like laziness. The fact that a lot of people have issues translating their military speak into civilianized speak when it comes to resumes and things, and being a previous HR leader that had to go through a lot of resumes and decipher or translate what it was people were saying, both from the military side and the civilian side. It's always nice when a resume shows up in the proper language, and the people are understanding of who you are, what your culture is. Obviously, if you're a defense contractor and there's a lot of military in your industry, things are going to get through that wouldn't typically get through the civilian side. Me leaving the military and going to two civilian companies, it was hard when I would see, someone else's resume that was military based and be like, okay, well, I can translate this, but most people can't. So.
Absolutely. So we're talking about trying to find some type of common language so that when a service member submits a resume, the person on the other end has a better idea of what types of skills and I guess what they're going to be bringing to the table, basically.
And when I first transitioned, I've said this a couple times, the military has a way of inflating your self-worth because you do mean something to them. But
Sure.
Obviously part of keeping you in is that your military experience and training is going to be transferable in some way to the civilian sector. So, like, oh, when you get out, people are going to be looking for you. And I repeatedly thought to myself, well, they're going to learn how to read what I have on here. I shouldn't have to change for them. I'm the one who's been in the service for 20 years. I'm the one who's been protecting their country, serving the country's interests, things like that. And so it took a lot of browbeating from recruiters to get me to make that change. And then when I got to a point where I could talk the talk and walk the walk, I noticed a huge uptick in the number of interviews I was getting and the number, how long conversations would go, how far past the allotted time because we were having a good conversation.
Yeah.
And then after having roles, that's when you start to get your culture into their culture and talk about things. But I do think it's also a good idea to not always be, well, when I was in the Army, when I was in the Army, because then it becomes was this while you were in the Army? Like,
right.
That track record sticks. So it's about blending the two cultures in that when it gets.
I think you highlighted one of the first problems, right? Is that majority of people, maybe hiring managers or recruiters, have not served. So they're looking at your experience and you're basically speaking a foreign language. We know how much the military loves acronyms. You cannot assume that everyone will either know what an acronym is or take the time to research that acronym, right? I know we were talking before here, and an average glance at a resume is 6 to 7 seconds. So if you have a bunch of acronyms or titles that the civilian recruiter cannot relate to or does not quickly understand, it's likely they're probably going to pass on your resume. Am I right?
Yeah, if they're going to take only 6 seconds to look, they're going to take even less to when they say, I don't know what that is. And I don't want to figure it out. I don't want to spend more seconds to figure it out so that I can translate that to the person I work for who's going to need a little handhold on this person.
Absolutely. That's going to be another layer that they have to explain.
Yeah, it's tough. And Tara and I were talking prior to this about resumes that she's going through for certain roles, and a lot of times when I'm looking at a mass of resumes, the first thing I'm looking at is how easy is it to read, and what are those hard stops where, well, they don't have a degree in X and the requirement is X, so I just go straight to that, and I'm like, nope, and then my yep pile then gets a little closer look. And the easier it is to read, the easier the flow is, the better time you're going to have with that recruiter or hiring manager.
Absolutely. When we've had this conversation with candidates and amongst ourselves, but when we're talking about translating your military experience, some people take that as dumbing it down. What would you say to that?
I say it's finding the right language. I mean, at the UN, there's a person talking, and there's people that don't speak that language, and they have a earpiece in, and it's being translated to them. The part that a lot of people don't realize is when you make that translation, there's a lot of different uses for that originating word. You could be a manager. You could be a leader. You could be a director. You could be a team lead. You could be it's all it allows you to tailor it for the role you're looking at because you have that experience. And typically we have been in charge of more than most CEOs have been in charge of at a lower level. As a platoon leader, 128 infantry soldiers underneath me. That's more than most companies. As a head of HR in a brigade, I had 42 HR professionals geographically dispersed across the entire planet, all working for me in different time zones, all in sync. That's more than most chief HROs deal with, and that was supporting 15,000 people. So it's like it's a different world, but you have some wiggle room with what it is you put on your resume. The real trick is after you've put something on your resume, after you've got the right language, being able to speak to it in that way as well.
I think that's another great point is how can you describe when you're in an interview, how can you describe what you just said, right? Of leading for a team of 45 who are dispersed throughout the country or world, I should say, across different time zones. How do you start taking those bullets and translating them into how you were responsible for that? So being able to communicate the level of organization, the level of communication needed for that, because it might be so foreign to someone who is in front of you, right? And they're just thinking, okay, so they have 45 direct reports, not realizing that's a ton across different time zones and the organization needed for that.
Yeah, the other thing about it is the way you can do that, what I would say are like little nuggets that they would want to reach for, or follow-up questions or draw interest, are those metrics that you use inside of those statements. The number of dollars is always a good one. There's something about money. People like it when you save it, and they like it when you bring a bunch of it into the company. So, you know, if you were responsible and kept account of $18.2 million in arms room or whatever, that's something that a nugget that's going to relate to them, like, oh, big dollars, you were responsible for that much. Like, our company doesn't even have that much in annual revenue. So it can be a double-edged sword, though, because if all of a sudden you're more powerful than they're looking for, their thought is, well, this is a smaller company and I don't necessarily want you to leave in a couple of years. So right sizing yourself to the company is something, or right sizing, playing to the proper level of responsibility that you're accustomed to is another way to do it.
That's a good tip. Money is definitely universal. So you're right. People love to save. They want their company to save it. They also want to bring more money into their company. However, maybe you could always say like more than $5 million versus like $18 million, right? Like, we don't have to be so specific based on the company size that you might be interviewing for.
I want to touch on Pedro's question.
Sure, let me put it up. Here we go, Pedro.
So what difference does it make to have a degree versus experience of, 10, 12, 20 years? That is, I don't think that's a question that can be written in stone. There are, and I've said this on this channel before, there are people who love the bells and whistles associated with people's names and resumes. SPHR is a good example. PMO, that type of thing, PMP. It's really about the culture of the place that you're going to work at. A lot of times hopefully when I'm looking, it'll say X degree or a represented amount of years of experience. And a lot of good companies know that that's the case. And if you can get a seat with those people to talk through them with that, you can always be working towards your degree, but I have experience in X. So yeah, it's a tough one to nail down, but you should always be trying to improve yourself. So working towards A, B, C, or D, or getting certifications in A, B, C, or D, is something that is going to help promote that.
And a lot of times it's a company standard, maybe for no reason, maybe for just.
It's usually for laziness. Yeah.
Laziness. Right.
A company that, and this is something that is near and dear to my heart, is like a lot of companies, they want exactly the person to fit this role. And they're not even willing to take 10 or 20% of not the right fit in a good person that works hard and has a experience, to take that 20% and train them up to get the exact right person and flavor for their company and culture. And I have a lot of opinions on that, but part of that is probably that they're just looking at so many resumes and so many people that
it's a weed out.
It's a weed out factor.
Right. Because Pedro has a good point. Just because you have a degree in the subject matter, or just any degree, doesn't make you necessarily efficient or great at your job. It's true. But sometimes it is just one of those hard requirements that can be tough to manage. I wanted to put up this nice graphic that you provided, Rue, which I think is a super valuable tool for folks watching and listening. This will be recorded so you guys can come back to this. But it has like a nice little comparison across columns for military title, for corporate equivalent. I think this is a great thought exercise as well, to kind of look at, what could I position myself as, or what type of language should I adopt when I am interviewing, when I'm writing my resume? How would you explain this graphic?
I I actually ran into this on this morning. I went to have breakfast with my wife and father-in-law, and the house across the way had a Connex, is what we call them in the military.
Oh, yeah.
That most people are like, what is that? I'm like, oh, it's the thing on the back of a semi that gets, like placed on a flatbed so that it can move from place to place. And I'm like, ironically, I'm talking about this today in a Hot Jobs episode. It is really hard to deprogram the words and the
Sure.
knowledge that you have been using. And you have to think of it. We used to write in the military to the 8th grade reading level so that anybody, no matter what, could pick it up and read through it. And when you always make the assumptions that, oh, well, they've seen these movies. They know what a platoon leader is, a platoon commander, a company commander, or what have you. And everyone's seen Saving Private Ryan. There's like all these things that like feed your knowledge of what the world looks like. And it took a while for me to figure out that, the way this is translated, it isn't about you as much, and it's not about them. It's just about the way it is for the general population. And they're just not going to understand acronyms, period. By the way, when you go to the civilian side, they have acronyms too.
Yeah.
They have acronyms that match military acronyms, which makes it extra confusing. And I think it's a good culture exchange where when that happens, you're like, oh, we actually had connexes in the military and this is what it was. And you're like, oh, well, our connex is continuous overland,
right.
Coming up with their letters and schemes. It's a way to bridge those gaps. It's important, I think, when you're going through your resume, your LinkedIn, and you're doing these translations that you see, that you give it to somebody to read that does not speak the speak or walk the walk or talk the talk, and just be like, can you explain to me what I did? Can you run down it? And if they can't do it, then you might need to look at different words. Now, granted, the person you're handed it to might not be as educated as the person that's going to be looking at your resume at some Fortune 500 company. And they might be able to understand it a little bit more. But if you can just give it to to your neighbor that doesn't know anything about the military, and they can read through it and like, oh, yeah, this makes sense. Like, okay, great. Then it'll work with the recruiter as well.
That's an excellent tip. Giving it to someone and then having them repeat back to you what they've interpreted that you do based on what you've written is a phenomenal exercise. I think this is another great example. I know we talk pretty frequently about this on Hot Jobs, is having, your own board of advisors or having a trusted circle, and having that circle be diverse, right? That if you are a transitioning service member, that you have some folks who are in your transition, maybe post-transition, and some civilian board members, so to speak, so that you can have a varied opinion. And I think that you're going to get further with that. And I liked your example there, Rue. I know how hard it can be to learn a new language, and especially as an adult, right? Like when you're so used to calling something one way. For you, we're talking about the example of this is a Connex. But just trying to know that what you're saying may not land with the person listening. And so how can you be more clear? Like, I think that's what we're all trying to do. We're trying to come to this common language where we can ask better questions and then thus receive better information on the back.
I think being humble in your communication as well, being like, listen, you obviously know that I've been in the military for 20 years. And if anything comes out of my mouth that you don't necessarily understand due to how I phrased it, please let me know and I will restate it. Just see you posted a comment. Posted a comment about if you've got everything that they checked off, but you're still not getting the call back, Is there any for sure way that you can get in? No, because the enemy always has a vote. But what works and has worked for me is about getting to whoever that decision maker is or that hiring manager. And that a lot of that comes from your connections, inside knowledge on the job, the role. If you don't know somebody at the company, introduce yourself to somebody at the company on LinkedIn. Be like,
Yep.
hey, I was looking at this job and I was wondering if you, here's my qualifications. I was just wondering if you had 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, to talk about the company, do an informational interview or informational call. Leave it as just neutral as possible. So you're not trying to sell anything. You're not trying to get anything from them personally. You just want to know, and then let your charm and your knowledge and your eagerness, your quest for knowledge to get them to go, you know what, I really like this person. I'm going to use our internal referral program to get their resume past ATS and into the hands of a decision maker. That's probably the best advice I would give you.
Yeah, I think this is where you need to rely on your network. I think the other thing that could be helpful sometimes is, and remember, not everyone is going to say yes. We're giving you this advice. It might not work 100% of the time. You can reach out if the recruiter is listed. Hey, what can I do to improve? Why am I not a best candidate for this role? They might say, hey, we have it's an internal hire. Like you would have fit, but we have something else. Or, hey, yeah, I see that you don't have the certification that was listed in the requirements. It's a hard requirement. It is certainly possible. So I agree. Make connections on LinkedIn, reach out, use your own networks. Is there anyone, if you're connected to Rue and you know that he's an HR professional, hey, Rue, is there anyone that you can connect me with that I could have a few minutes of their time so I can just go over my resume and see what I'm missing? Ask for that from your network.
Yeah. And if you can, it's important to, know that a lot of times it's not personal. It's not how they're, affecting you. You mentioned something about the entry level roles and for people transitioning. There are entry level like internships and what's the thing you do, Tara? Skillbridge, and things like that people can try for, but a lot of times you're transitioning out of the military, you still need an income, and a lot of those are just so low for the entry level that they're few and far between and not necessarily as worth it as they could be.
Sure.
Unfortunately.
This is a double comment, Jess, and then Jay right underneath her, so they don't hear back from recruiters. That's the thing, guys. We are not going to be able to control who responds. Any tactics? I think honestly, a tactic would be to be genuine, to ask a genuine question, to come across as a person, write it yourself, ask a pointed question, not like, can I have 5 minutes of your time? I applied for X position. I was not called back. Can you tell me why I'm not a best candidate? Don't leave this ambiguous. Can I pick your brain? No, ask something specific that they can answer.
The other thing I would say is keep as much of the communication watershed event, like the callback, in your court. You have your matrix of, these are the 17 jobs I applied for. This is where they are in the process. My final conversation with the last person I talked to was this. And I said, when could I expect to hear? And when would you like me to get back in touch with you if I haven't heard from you? Like whatever you can throw in there that makes them go, oh, this person really cares, for one. Two, I don't like to embarrass myself by not getting back to people. I mean, granted, there are some recruiters that really just don't care. And so them being that attentive to our communication plan moving forward is going to make me want to serve them better and give them the information that they need going
I agree.
forward. Yeah, it's sad that recruiters don't do that. It's just the way it is.
Yes. I see it on both ends. I try to answer every message I get. If any of you applied with our company around August of last year, I had over 100 LinkedIn messages, and I was on vacation the day that this like announcement dropped. So it was really hard for me to get back to everyone while on vacation. I'm not perfect. However, I really try to answer every message, but I'm much more likely to answer a message that is not a prompt and a vague, like, we should connect. I always connect. But if they have a question, I'm much more likely to answer the question or the when can I expect to hear back? I'll be honest. Hey, I'm on vacation for the next week. I will get to this, Monday of whatever date. So being really specific, I think helps. we're going to talk about a couple of jobs, and then there's a couple of other good questions on here that we'll have time to get to. But because it is hot jobs, I feel like we should get to a job or two. I would love to talk about one of my favorite jobs today, and it is the skill bridge at Texas Instruments for the equipment technician position. I've done a lot of informational interviews for this position this week that I'm super excited about. This position itself does take place in 3 locations. You do have to be there. This is not a remote opportunity. Dallas, Texas, Lehigh, Utah, and Portland, Maine. This role performs general maintenance, repairs, and upgrades to the semiconductor equipment. They're going to do some troubleshooting, looking at the systems, eliminating any process lag. They're then going to analyze the equipment and the data to share with the engineering team and document their findings and technical solutions. So we're looking for folks with a technical aptitude. So mechanics do really well in this position. I've actually had some IT people also do really great at this position. So this is a skill bridge opportunity. So it is for transitioning service members as they approach their last 180 days of service. We would love if you have at least 90 days for a skill bridge, but you can be considered for if you do have less time than that. This position, I'm accepting people all the way through 2027. So it's not too soon to do an interview to ask about the position. It is, like I said, 3 locations, accepting all now. This is a really unique opportunity in that it also comes with a stipend. So you are supported to help with housing and transportation and food costs, and that all comes from Texas Instruments. And I know that there will be a comment saying that that's not allowed. However, this particular one is allowed because this is a standard across Texas Instrument. Doesn't matter of your military affiliation or if you're a college intern, every single intern at Texas Instruments gets a stipend for living expenses, because I want to make sure that you have the ability to really focus on learning throughout your skill bridge. So if that interests you, you can head up to hiremilitary.us under the skill bridge tab, and Texas Instrument. You can apply just to the Texas one or the Lehigh one. If it's Portland, Maine, just shoot me a note. Either way, it will get to the right person. I wanted to show this comment out that we're talking about a gap in resume. I think this is an interesting one.
That's the one I was staring at. I was like,
Yeah, I think this is an interesting one because I probably feel differently about a gap. I'm personally, when I see a gap in a resume, I'm really never too concerned, especially if there is something like education. I can see that they pursued a degree. That doesn't necessarily concern me. I'm wondering too, you said that you're in the IT field. Because this is an ever-changing field, is there a way that you can show that you are still connected to the field in some way? Maybe I think it's very reasonable to have an employment gap while pursuing education in that field. So I would definitely somehow preface that either in my professional summary or in the education section.
And employment gaps are going to be more and more prevalent and commonplace, especially with COVID year 1, year 2, that created a lot of employment gaps. And there's outright stating that you were in school. And don't keep it down at the bottom. There are different ways to post that as your current work role, or highlight it in the front part. That, oh, this person's obviously was in school for A, B, C, and D. Yeah, that's a tough one, and it's another one that's like to each their own with who's reading it. But if you can translate it in multiple ways, try to do so.
Yeah, I agree. There was one more. I know we're gonna run over a couple minutes on time, but I saw one. Joshua. Omitting their military service from their resume to make them fit into the perfect candidate. I feel pretty strongly about this, Joshua. I would not do that. I have met with so many people who eventually they tell me that they've served, and I immediately say, why wasn't that the first line? I want to know that. That makes such a difference. I mean, I am always, because I'm hiring in a certain space and I'm working with candidates in this certain space, I feel pretty strongly about that. But I think that's part of who you are as a person. I think that gives you so much more credit. I think that gives you so much more depth. I would hate for you to take that off. Rue, what do you think?
Yeah. Anybody that isn't going, if you got the job there, you're still a veteran. You still had your experiences. And so then it's like, okay, I'm going to omit everything I've ever said that I would ever say about that time period. And there's not a whole lot left. I mean, I'm sure you're a person, there's stuff left, but it's like, that's a hard thing to do. And it's not a company or culture that I would want to work in, honestly.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with that.
A lot of that problem here in Portland, Oregon, where I'm living. Like,
sure.
The mill gov side is very low, and they don't care. We want to keep Portland weird. You know, it's like
Portland's weird.
And I totally, trust me, I totally get that.
Yeah, yeah. But you are who you are, and I think that's a good thing. That's a positive thing.
Yes.
We have to wrap up for today. But we can certainly continue to answer comments and questions as this is being recorded and posted. So feel free to keep chiming in if you have things you want us to talk about. And this can certainly be another topic that we do on another day, being that there's a lot of engagement. So first, I'd like to thank Rue for joining me today, and then all of you for commenting and participating in our conversation. And you can find us again in the comments and here next week. So thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
See ya.